I am Steve Kraus from Bessemer Venture Partners, and I'm pleased to be here with my awesome colleague, Sofia Guerra. And we are joined by the co-founders of our amazing portfolio company, SmarterDx, Dr. Michael Gao and Dr. Josh Geleris. That's going to become important in a second. You'll see why. And they, over the last bunch of years, have built SmarterDx, which we'll talk about, into one of the leading health AI companies in the industry. And SmarterDx was recently acquired by New Mountain Capital, which is actually one of the leading private equity firms investing in healthcare and has a bright future ahead, which we'll talk about as well. So Mike and Josh, welcome. Thanks for talking with us today and sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm curious, go back to the origin story of how Josh, you and Mike met, or vice versa. And how did you know, like, as two doctors, that you were ultimately going to be successful in being entrepreneurs together? Like, talk us through that origin story.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, so we did residency together at New York Presbyterian. We were both in the kind of internal medicine residency program. It wasn't until after residency that we got to know each other. And I was working on the transformation team at New York Presbyterian, and Josh was doing a lot of really cool work around physician variability at Columbia. And so that kind of combination of being clinical and being doctors, but also having kind of a technical bent, I think is really what kept us in touch after residency.
Maybe we can go back to the very early beginnings. And I know you kind of started with the idea of starting SmarterDx pre-COVID. I know Steve met you really in the early days when you were thinking potentially of joining forces with one of our portfolio companies, Qventus. That didn't end up happening. You went back to clinical practice and then started the company again. Can you tell us a little bit about making that decision and the start and pause and then restarting, and what made you convince you to kind of jump in and work on this?
We definitely felt it was, enough of a good idea to quit our kind of doctor jobs and deal with our wives' sort of respective complaints about that to start the company. And actually, sort of pre-COVID, the first sort of 3 hospitals we spoke with, 2 of them were actually immediately interested in moving forward. So we had kind of pretty immediate traction off the bat. And then I still have the email and sort of read it occasionally. One of the hospital's chief medical officers said, hey, I have to deal with this little thing called coronavirus. Do you mind if I get back to you in a couple of weeks? And, they became our customer actually about 3 years later. So, for other potential founders listening to this, just be a heads up on the sales cycle side.
Don't start companies right before pandemics.
Yeah. And when, I think when COVID happened, all of those revenue cycle conversations dried up for obvious reasons. But even after COVID, there was a period of time where sort of the hospitals felt super unstable. And when they feel super unstable, they're not going to work with a brand new company that they've never heard of. So there was probably about a 1.5 year period where, we just couldn't really make forward progress. Luckily, unluckily and luckily, we were in New York City and we were hospitalists. So it's not like there was a shortage of need for hospitalists. And, I think that was a big driving reason to going back to clinical practice. And then about a 1.5 years later, we started to get people responding to our outbound kind of like sales calls started to line up again. And then that was kind of when we unpaused and resumed sort of building SmarterDx.
Love that. I first heard about SmarterDx right after kind of you raised your seed round and thought that the smarter business model was so elegant, and the technology on the clinical intelligence side was really fascinating and kind of at the cutting edge and early in a lot of the AI trends that we're now kind of taking for granted. We tried to kind of chat with you, you took a few calls with us, but you weren't really thinking about taking capital. Really take us to kind of the decision of raising your Series A, choosing a partner and kind of thinking about kind of how you wanted to build the company from 1.5 million in ARR at the time when we invested in only a couple of customers to what kind of ended up happening in the next few years?
Healthcare is, of course, it's super unique in so many different ways. There's the length of the sales cycle. There's, not really kind of huge buyers, like there's not a Google that's paying, $25 billion for a whiz type buyer in the healthcare space. And it's a very, very large TAM when you think of healthcare, but then each individual narrow segment can sort of like actually be deceptively small when you kind of like have to work around all the incumbents and, kind of platform solutions that are already in this space. And so I think we wanted to optimize for kind of two different things. One was we wanted to optimize for, kind of, yes, a kind of, top tier VC with brand that lets us have access to talent and, we can use to talk to engineers and they feel like we have something behind us. And then the other is we wanted a sort of VC that understood what it looks like to grow in healthcare, and kind of understood kind of intuitively what the sales cycles were, who the buyers were, like who the other players are in the space are. And I think one of the things that kind of very much stood out was when sort of we first met Sofia, and then when sort of we had a conversation with the group of us, I think it did stand out that, the two of you kind of understood the space really well as well and kind of done your homework. And so I think sort of that was what gave us a lot of confidence and a lot of excitement for this partnership.
For the record, I made Mike pay for my breakfast when I convinced him to finally go to
I never heard that story. Wow, Mike.
I didn't have my credit card and I had to Venmo him.
Mike, we owe you some, okay?
Yeah. And that, I want to say those dollars are at the Series A price. So if you just...
Good one.
I mean, I feel so lucky to have worked with. I mean, I really believe it, not because the outcome, just because like I really always enjoyed talking with you guys every time we picked up the phone. And we're trying now to replicate. You guys are like the unicorns of, you want obviously to invest in a great company, but at the end of the day, at the Series A, it's also the founder, investor relationship. And I just like, there was never a time where I didn't love talking to you, even when Mike took like an hour to answer a question that I asked. But I'm curious, your guys' relationship early on, how did you, like, it's not clear to me how Mike, and I'm going to categorize this, so please push back, but Mike ended up being kind of the external guy, and I know you guys did a lot. And Josh, I would think of you as sort of like, okay, there's something that needs to be fixed, product operations, whatever, customer success. Like you were sort of more the internal guy. I know you guys made the big decisions together. That was clear. And you were on all the important calls, both of you. But like, how did you guys figure out that roles and responsibilities and how you divide the SmarterDx, functional areas up?
Some of it I think was pretty natural. Mike has a talent for delivering a level of like white glove service to customers that I have never seen before and like still kind of am in awe of, in terms of like really understanding what they're asking for and making sure that we're able to deliver it. Sometimes he promises stuff that we have to then like figure out how to deliver, but like it really was a pretty natural split where he just like was able to communicate what we're trying to do to our customers, both on the sales side and on the support side afterwards, in a way that they really got and made them feel like we were going to be a great partner for them. And I think that's something that we really try to continue all the way through, and not just say, but like really deliver on from the company's perspective in terms of how we build our business and how we orient our entire teams. So that I think fit Mike really nicely. And
I think Josh, I think there's kind of two components, one of which I think he's really good at kind of seeing the long-term product vision and not overly optimizing for the short term, but really trying to ask where the product is going. And then two was, I think I knew Josh was technical. I mean, we're kind of both technical physicians, but I remember distinctly there were moments where like, hey, Josh would have built up the entire data pipeline that we would end up using for, sort of like a certain client onboarding. And that actually kind of proved out to be the right model. And, I think it's remarkable when your kind of physician co-founder is kind of able to contribute at like a meaningful level to like your engineering needs, quite frankly. And that's kind of a level of technical expertise that is quite rare.
Mike, I remember when we first invested, you were the sales guy. And right when we were about to invest, you had retained a search firm to try to hire a chief commercial officer. I think it's sort of like a two-part question to help founders, healthcare founders in particular, as you referenced, it's so freaking hard, right? I mean, it's so freaking hard. And so I think we admired that you had really, kind of done the founder-driven sales and proven that you could do it, but then kind of knew that you needed to bring on someone to ramp up the efforts. Walk us through both of those things. Like, how did you do what you did early on as a founder-driven sales rep? And then two, when did you know it was time to bring someone on? And like, how did you get that hire right? Because I'd also say that first commercial hire, I found maybe 50% of the time is successful, maybe less. So
yeah, I think everybody just has to start with founder-led sales. And, principally it's because you don't actually know what you're selling until you not just sell it once, but until you sell the same thing, kind of several times with roughly the same kind of talk track. And so when we started, we were actually trying to sell a concurrent CDI solution, so documentation improvement while the patient was still in the hospital. It was customers were probing kind of how we knew what financial value we would add. And so that's when we kind of shifted to say, all right, we'll wait until you do all your stuff and then we'll run our algorithm. And if we find things still, that's, genuinely net new. And the insight was that there were a handful of calls in the middle where I try to present optionality, like you can have us concurrently or you can have us pre-bill. And it wasn't until we simplified the sales call to just pre-bill that it actually kind of caught traction. And so I think one of the things that's important to internalize is at the end of the day, you'll know your sales message is working when you can have a 20-minute, really simple sales call and speak exactly to the pain points that you need to speak to.
I love that.
And then that converts. And from there, then you have a sales message and a sales delivery that you can actually teach other people and that they can deliver kind of on your behalf. And that kind of scales up from there. And so the exploration part is founder-led sales. And then it's a matter of, kind of the scaling part, building a sales organization, kind of understanding which conferences are highest leverage and, kind of all the things that go along with building that organization. And I think that's where, kind of experience directly translates. So, kind of the 0 to 1 is by definition not something that historical experience can help you navigate, but the 1 to 100 very much is.
Mike, we've talked about this, in those early days, pre-product market fit, you only get so many shots at customers, especially in healthcare, because there's only so many customers. And in each of those shots, you get back from the customer only a tiny bit of feedback. And sometimes it's like 1 or 2 questions from the customer. But those 1 or 2 questions that you're getting back are like the gold that you have to refine to be like what Mike did extremely well in the early days at SmarterDx was hear each of those questions and I think he spent hours like analyzing each question, trying to understand like, why are they asking that? How can I answer that better the next time? How can we figure out like which direction this takes us, and triangulating a nugget of gold from a conversation 3 months ago with something that he just heard and putting that all together. Because ultimately that, like, if we just kept trying to sell the thing that we thought was best, we wouldn't be here today. But by triangulating all of those little tiny pieces and little tiny hints of signal, like we found the core thing that became our growth engine and our go-to-market motion and our product and really the entire thing. So that's really what the exploration process sounds like, is like understanding why they asked that one single question and going so deep on it that you've like covered every angle until you like fully appreciate what it means for the business.
By the way, one thing that I've always been incredibly impressed about the two of you is, one, for as much analytical and thoughtful you are, you make decisions incredibly quickly. I think hiring Wayne was one of them. You stopped the process, met him, made a very quick decision. It was similar when we were chatting about a CFO and introduced you to Jonathan. And the speed at which you guys were kind of signing customers and implementing and growing was incredibly something that we've never seen before. Curious, kind of what were some of the challenges of scaling that quickly, both technically and potentially operationally, and kind of what made you overcome that or achieve the scale that you were able to deliver at the quality that you were delivering to your customers at?
It was really hard. There was like
No sleep.
yeah, I mean, really, I think when you are growing sort of, 600% a year, it means that you can grow 3x in number of people and still be sort of like outpaced in terms of number of customers. Also, from an engineering perspective, you generally build something for like within an order of magnitude, kind of from a scale perspective. And so kind of every time you hit a new order of magnitude, there's just going to be stuff that you need to sort of rewrite and redo. And, I think one of the characteristics that Josh and I share is like the ability to kind of operate at the high strategic level and the ability to get like deep down into the weeds. I still sometimes write SQL queries for customer success questions, and I think sort of what that allows is it allows that as you're kind of onboarding a bunch of people who are new, for the founders to maintain a certain level of quality and kind of a certain level of quality control and sort of set a certain standard. And then I think from there, you have to be really, really rigorous about not hiring people just to hire, but maintaining sort of like an incredibly sort of high bar for candidates as well. And I think there were days where we questioned that strategy, where it was just incredibly painful because we didn't have enough people to do all the things we needed to do. But I think the level of talent that we've been able to kind of keep within the organization, and as they've come on board and kind of been able to take things off Josh and my plate, just seeing the incredible results that they're able to bring kind of, has really paid off in the long term.
It's really hard to maintain a high bar for talent.
So hard.
Because
Yeah.
like when you're growing this fast, you know what needs to get done. And you're like, there's no way I can do it with this team. Like we have to be twice as big, and you can't just like find that talent bar that easily. And the same thing is true when you're building products. Like you need to get features out, but the features have to be good. And it's really hard to like maintain an extremely high quality bar when you're pushing things out, when there's a backlog of 100 features that your customers are begging you for, and you just need to spend another week on this thing that you've already spent a week on. Growth like this has been very hard.
I have one final question. It's two-part, of course, because I can never leave anything just one part. But it was so cool to be part of this journey and I'm curious how you guys process this, where you literally when I first met you, you were like two ex-doctors who, no offense, I had like maybe a couple PowerPoint slides, and I was like, I don't really know what to make of this. And ultimately, as Sofia said, you ultimately started the company and pretty rapidly became known by almost everybody, right? Like all of a sudden, SmarterDx went from you guys as two doctors to like being one of the hottest companies, if not the hottest company in the health AI space, for sure one of the fastest growing. Lots of investors chasing after you, calling you. Like, how do you process that kind of change in the perception of you guys as entrepreneurs in such a quick period of time in the company? Like, how did you guys think about that? And then in particular, ultimately the decision to partner with New Mountain Capital as the evolution of the company. I'm just curious, that sort of journey, it was so fast, at least it felt to me.
Steve, there was a whole bunch of work that, like, sort of like the iceberg analogy, right? There's like all of this under the surface that, Mike and I spent a year and a half at NYP before even leaving to start SmarterDx or starting the company, like trying to understand revenue cycle and healthcare and how hospitals get paid and all of that. And then we spent like 2 years before we even got our first customer, right? And like all of that time we were learning, and that learning was compounding. And so it really was a situation where, from my perspective at least, like
it didn't feel that fast.
We have been doing this for a long time. Like, now I have a little bit more perspective, and it really has been rapid. But like for a long time, it was a struggle bus that we weren't so sure about. But like that compounding learning, like was critical to getting takeoff velocity for us, and I think puts us in a good position for the go forward.
Yeah, I think we've done a good job, and depending on who you ask, maybe too good of a job, really focusing on solving customer problems, and almost just like broadly ignoring all investor reach out. And at the end of the day, I think that kind of if you do really well with customers, capital is not a scarce resource. And if you do really well with investors and you make a big splash in the news, it doesn't guarantee that customers will follow. And I think one of the things we were really excited about with kind of New Mountain Capital and Smarter Technologies is through our time with Matt Hull and Jeremy Dolinsky, like they very much took a customer first, like what do health systems need approach to this. That was kind of really exciting. And for us, we could see a kind of direct line from where we are today to kind of being more of a platform partner for health systems. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to optimize for, is to be a better and better partner for health systems. And I think kind of if that's your North Star, then it's easy to not get too big of an ego around, kind of like a fundraise size or something like that.
I guess the last question I have is if you could either put yourself in kind of the very early day shoes, or advice you have for founders that are in that sticky moment where they're trying to figure things out, like what would you tell them?
I think one mistake that I made was, I think we did a really good job being incredibly scrappy pre-product market fit. And that's where kind of Josh and I, both being technical, both being physicians, kind of all that was super helpful. And there was a moment in time where I thought we had product market fit. So, when we raised our Series A and we said, hey, we're gonna, kind of 5x this year. And then there were like 6 or 7 months in between where none of the sales actually landed.
Yeah, we weren't paying you back for your coffee yet. We weren't going to pay back.
Yeah. And like, we're all just, I was like freaking out a little bit, and we kept kind of like resourcing and hiring like really tightly throttled for the organization. And then I think as a result of that, kind of was on our back foot for, kind of the following year and a half, because we were just growing so quickly at that point. And I think what I would sort of say is there's really 2 modes in which you're operating as a founder. There's kind of the pre-product market fit, be scrappy. And at least in healthcare, because of how long sales cycles are, it's actually kind of not super easy to immediately know the moment you have product market fit. But when you have that moment, it is about resourcing and capturing as much of the market as you possibly can, and growing your product, as much as, and like time more than capital becomes your enemy. And I think, just adapting that mindset is super critical.
I was listening to a podcast with Jensen Huang, and they asked him, you may have heard this. They asked him, like, if you were to start a company today, like what kind of company would he start, knowing everything that he knows about NVIDIA? And his answer was, I wouldn't do it. It's too hard. He's since like clarified that a little bit. When I heard him say that, I was walking my dog around the block, and I almost started crying because it like resonated so deeply. It is like so hard. So my advice is like, if you know you want to do this and start a company, be prepared, go all in, know that it's going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life, and be ready for that, because it's not worth dipping a toe in the water and then pulling it out when it gets hard. Like, either go for it or don't go for it. But I don't think there's such thing as like a
Totally true. Hey guys, this is awesome. I'm just so happy for the two of you. I know you've got a lot more work left to do at Smarter Technologies, and I can't wait to see what you guys do. But this conversation just reminds me, like, well, the real reason I love my job is I get to work with human beings like you, but I also just like learn so much from you. And you guys shared so much wisdom today in terms of your journey and how you've, how you got through the struggle bus to success and some lessons learned. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks. You guys have both been amazing partners along the way.
Yeah, Sofia especially has been.
Totally true, Mike.
It's on the record.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Love you guys.
Raise,
Thanks.
Yeah.
See ya.